I'm Geraldine Guyman, partner at The Blueprint, and we facilitate business transformation by placing inclusive, game-changing leaders in creative businesses. Welcome to the latest conversation with Game Changers, a regular interview series in which we sit down with a fearless leader from the world of creativity. Today, I'm talking to Grace Francis. Hello, Grace.
Hello, lovely to be here.
So Grace has kindly joined us today. They are the Chief Experience Officer at Karmarama, who you'll know are part of Accenture Interactive, where they design and deliver commercial and creative growth opportunities for both their clients and for their company. Grace, I hope you don't mind me saying, I would describe as a fierce advocate of the creative benefits of inclusivity. And Grace has carved out a kind of niche for herself, delving into the empathy and ethics of design, lecturing at Hyper Island and UAL, mentoring at Makerversity, and they've also founded Elsewhere Studio, which is a free offering using the principles of design thinking to help people make key life decisions and unblock their brains, I guess is the way of describing it. And on top of all that, they've somehow found time to talk to me. So thank you, Grace.
It's really lovely. It's really nice to be able to talk to you. We obviously worked together a few years ago, so an hour with you now feels like a really lovely gift. I've missed you.
Thank you. So I'm just keen to talk to you, first of all, about the choices that have taken your career to kind of get you where you are now. So kind of where did you start? How did you move from those brand side content roles through to kind of .com, through to kind of helping traditional agencies pivot, and now to being Chief Experience Officer within a consultancy? I'd love to find out the decisions that kind of got to you here.
Yeah, thank you. It's been really interesting to have a path that isn't necessarily defined, and knowing that getting to CXO and defining CXO as a role often means that there wasn't a person in front of me who'd done it before. And so for me, a lot of it was recognizing that my role has actually stayed the same a lot of the time, but the language and lexicon we use for that role and the way we understand how it can help clients and bring business value has evolved and matured. So I started off working in sort of big tech and .com, and recognizing that what I was doing all the time was applying empathy to what the user might need, and then investigation to why something was happening. And that has actually carried through those two elements of empathy and investigation throughout the whole of my career. And I spent a number of years with those big tech consultancies and agencies. And when you and I worked together, we were working at WPP, and I came to a creative agency and I got headhunted, and all my colleagues in tech said, they don't mean the same thing you do when you talk about innovation. They mean something different. You're not going to like it. And because I'm stubborn, I thought, well, now I definitely have to go and find out what these guys are talking about. But those years in pure creative agencies really, really allowed me to understand brand, understand emotion, understand that we don't make decisions on rationale alone. We don't always understand why we make the decisions we make. And so spending time at Grey, spending time at Droga 5, and I came into Droga 5 as part of the acquisition for Interactive, really allowed me to get under the skin of what it means to appreciate how we feel about brands in the world. And now I'm part of Accenture Interactive. I can also understand about the roles that brands have to play as leaders on the world stage. We've had a very strange 18 months. And actually, I think companies are helping us in ways that they haven't ever before in history.
Was there any particular point in kind of that career or those decisions, a kind of moment or even a person that felt kind of really pivotal to getting you where you are now?
Yeah, it's a really lovely question. I think for me, there were two switches. The first was going from large tech where everything was measured, and everything was measured and planned, and you saw what had the best results, you tested it and you did it, and then moving into the creative space where actually recognizing leaps that don't make sense, leaps that are beyond logic alone, make huge changes. And sometimes we have to take those leaps, even if we're going into the unknown. And we do that all the time in advertising campaigns. We do it in creative, perhaps because the risk is lesser. But more and more in recent years, I've been working with organizations who are asking us to take those same bold, huge leaps. But when it comes to massive issues like sustainability, or even thinking about employee experience, what does it mean as we start to return to the office in a way that we haven't before, and employers have more rights? So that was really huge for me. But I think the other thing that came through was balancing that out on the other side and working with a consultancy where you can quantify at scale, huge scale. A very smart person, far smarter than me, sits in a room and says, I'm able to use these data points to predict who's going to like this service the most. And so we stop being about persuading and we start being about authentically connecting companies, products, services with people. We don't have to lean on the sort of snake oil Mad Men era of saying, I'm going to charm you into buying X over Y. We're going to say, we know what you like and X is best for you. And that's really freeing and really exciting.
See, I was going to ask you, Grace, about the consultancies. Obviously, they've seen a kind of meteoric rise within the kind of creative industry space over the last few years. And you just touched then on what consultancies are able to offer at scale that potentially agencies weren't. Is there anything else you think is driving the kind of success of the consultancies as they move into the creative arena?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think on a very individual level, if you're thinking about coming to a consultancy, there's a huge amount of meritocracy. It doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter where you come from. If you're able to contribute, there is a space for you to do so. And also there's support to train and to get better and to evolve different skill sets. But the reach and the breadth of being able to work together with very, very large numbers of people with great specialty. I'm working with a record label and I needed to plan some prediction for how a business would work. And I called up someone and in 10 minutes I was talking to a guy in Milwaukee and all he does is this particular type of predictive business design. And he brought his colleagues and they were amazing. And at the end of the call, we said, thank you very much. And we had the answer that we wanted. And that ability to reach out to someone in the network, you don't need to know their name, is really empowering and really exciting, because when you have an idea, you don't have to say, right, it needs to be one of us sitting around this table to have the answer.
Interesting. And do you think that's something that kind of agencies are able to kind of model? Should agencies be, learning from what the consultancies are doing and trying to kind of move themselves into that space? Or do you think, in your view, kind of an agency view of kind of creativity and a consultancy view should be and will remain slightly different in their ability to offer something slightly different?
Yeah, I think at this point in history, we're going to still look at a distance between consultancies and agencies. But in fact, many consultancies are made up of agencies. And one of the things we're really looking at closely on the inside, and we know the rest of the world is looking at us, is how that's been with certain acquisitions, especially Droga 5. Most recently, David Droga is now going to be the CEO of Accenture Interactive globally and the creative chairman. So we're really in uncharted territory, but those tests of how the two types of mind work together keep producing interesting and fantastic results. And I hope in the future we won't ask that question anymore, because that blended offering will have worked out the best of both. And that can go for if you're working in a consultancy that has agencies in it, or if you're independent, but we'll recognize what works, and that will go to change everybody's day-to-day working experience and the kind of creative that can go in the world, whether it's from my company or someone else's. That kind of change, I think, will filter through the industry and only lead to better work, which can only be good for all of us. Absolutely.
I'd like to move on to talk a little bit about kind of inclusion, which, is something I associate with you kind of very much. I remember when I think my first experience of you at Grey was when you stood up to the whole agency and presented the results of what had been a really dry poll, I guess, across the staff, like, who are we, what gender are you, what do you do in your everyday? And you presented it back in this kind of just a really fascinating, insightful way that really delved into, at the time, what were quite new, I think, areas for lots of the people listening around kind of inclusion, the kind of makeup of the industry, diversity and neurodiversity, etc. Do you think, and be really honest here, is our industry genuinely embracing diversity?
Yeah, it's so hard to tell, isn't it? Because I sit in a room and it's happening in the room I'm in because I'm making it happen. And the people I bring in are making it happen. What's happening in the room, 3 blocks along in a different part of Farringdon, who knows? And that to me is something I've held on to more and more and need to be aware of. I think we are still in loops of where we attract talent. I think we fall into muscle memory. So I think some organizations start with good intent, saying let's find a diverse workforce. And then if they don't find that hire immediately, they fall back into what looks good on a piece of paper, skill sets rather than holistic human beings. We're starting to realize how significant the lived experience is. So recognizing if you have intent to create product or service, any kind of output, any kind of creative output for a group of people, that person or people need to be represented in the room. And again, recognizing if you've met one disabled person, you've met one disabled person. If you met one trans person, they are just one trans person. And we need to stop appealing to and creating for people who aren't represented in the room. And for me, that's the biggest leap that we have to get to. There's a lot of good intent. We're remembering that the world outside is diverse, but if the room inside isn't diverse, we have a problem.
So yes, I think that's a criticism that's been kind of very fairly leveled at Adland over the years. I mean, I've been in the industry for 20 years and, making sure that the group of people often sitting in London, and especially now that so much is done on a global level, how do we accurately kind of understand and make sure we reflect back the needs of the audiences that we're trying to communicate to? I think it's a question that's been around for a while and is only becoming more and more and more prescient.
Yeah, and it's fantastic that we're talking about it more. And I think all of us are aware of it. Are all of us aware of it? A lot of the people I'm talking to are aware of it. And I think
that's a good question, I think, though, isn't it? Is everybody aware of it? Or is it just our little kind of algorithm, our little bubble?
Exactly, yeah. So awareness is a great first step, isn't it? But if I were starting a company today, if I decided to run off and start my own company, I don't think it would be ethical to start it with, 4 or 5 white people, for example. I don't think it would be ethical to start it with people of only one gender expression. And holding on to the recognition that every time you make a hire, every time you bring a new person into the building, you must advocate continuously for recognizing where those gaps are in your company, not even for the benefit of the company, actually because it's the right thing to do. But I also think there's an element of radical inclusivity, which is to say that all human beings have good days and bad days. Life can be difficult for all of us. That's part of the human condition. So recognizing sometimes when we're talking to someone of relative privilege, if I'm talking to a cis-het white guy who went to Eton, his experience will still have difficulties in it. They just won't be difficulties because of who he is. And that is something that really started to help me remember that while it's absolutely essential, we have different forms of people at work, and those people are safe to share their identities at work. We mustn't then turn and discriminate against the mass populace. Really what we need to do is have a space where we see diversity, we see inclusivity, and that means everybody is respected. And when you put it like that, it doesn't sound particularly radical, yes. And yet somehow we're not there.
No, we're not there. I think kind of 2 really interesting points there. I think the first around kind of making sure kind of everybody kind of is included, and especially we'll go on to talk and I think a bit more about kind of talent and how we can make sure that diverse talent is included in a bit, because we find now often when we're talking to clients about a brief or a client comes to us for a brief, diversity and making sure that we are kind of really casting the net wide to make sure that we are always putting forward a kind of a diverse mix of people is hugely important. But often if those people then, when it comes through the interview process, don't have, the equivalent traditional kind of skills or aptitudes, it's very easy for those people to fall out through the process. So how would you advise kind of companies to help address that?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 things. I think first of all, it's getting to that point of getting an offer. And in that respect, it's overlooking what often I think is classist and elitist behavior. So perhaps if we're thinking about socioeconomic background, I myself have absolutely no education. I have some GCSEs and an accent my parents forced me to have that is definitely not from my hometown. And has done me well most of the time, except people don't know where the hell I'm from. I hid that I came from this background for years and years and years. And, I would stay up late at night learning how to have perfect punctuation and better grammar to try to hide the fact that I hadn't had perhaps the education that all people in this country should deserve. And so I think it's about letting go of those small things to say this is and isn't right, bringing someone into the place because you see they have potential, because you see They are interested and invested. And the only two things I'm interested in when hiring someone is, are you interested in what we're doing? Do you have intellectual curiosity? Do you want to know what's going on? And are you emotionally invested as well? And are you enjoying being here? Is this a place you want to be in? And if he can say yes to both of those questions, I don't care where they've come from, I don't care what they've done in the past, that investment means that they're going to turn up to work and do some great stuff.
We kind of talk a lot about kind of attitude rather than just kind of the skills and proven aptitude, because I think it's exactly that. If someone kind of is interested, kind of emotionally kind of engaged and has all those, what we often kind of see as kind of the softer qualities, but actually I think are some of the fundamentals in terms of how you actually do succeed at work.
And I'm often going into creative spaces, introducing experience as a discipline. And that often means that the account management, sometimes the creatives or even the strategists don't have experience of my discipline. And what I look for when I go into that new place and say, right, we're doing a new thing, it's going to be great. And normally, as you know, that takes 3 or 4 years to fully evolve and grow. I'm just looking for the people who are saying, wow, what's that thing you do? I kind of want to know about this. And it's exactly the same principle. It's saying great attitude. Don't worry about the aptitude. That will come. Yes. Come with me. Let's have a chat. It's going to be great.
Okay. I'd love to just talk a little bit more about kind of you and what inspires you. Because obviously, you know, you're in a very elevated position now. You're a CXO within a consultancy, a kind of huge multi-million or billion kind of business. So lots of people within those organizations, within the wider industry, will be looking to you for inspiration. But I'd love to find out a bit about where you go when you need to kind of scratch your head and need a bit of inspiration.
Yeah, that's really nice. I think it's been such an odd time because normally I think a physical change of space is amazing. So years and years ago, I read about a judge sitting in war crime trials. And in no way am I comparing being a judge in a trial to what we do. And he'd say at lunchtime, he'd walk across the road from the trial into an art gallery and just look at the art, because the art was a balm for his soul. And while he had to see some of the worst parts of humanity, remembering the beauty of what people can create really buoyed him and allowed him to go back in the afternoon and do his very hard and very important job. And while what we do is nothing like that, being in spaces that are so diversely different to what we're doing, when we've been looking at screens all day, looking at other art, looking at other forms of creation is great. But what I'm really interested in at the moment is going to find the very young talent in a business. Sometimes it's interns, sometimes it's people on programs, sometimes it's people who are in the building for a week to try something out. And saying, what do you know that I don't know? And you'll actually even see it with your son. Like, where does this song come from? What does it mean? What's it attached to? What's the wider cultural space? And this isn't to make a better advert and to be more culturally aware. It's because that will feed you and inspire you. Everything we do, we create for someone else. We consciously examine and explore what another audience needs. We must give something for them. But when an artist makes any form of art, a piece of music, a painting, a book, they're doing it just for themselves. And that freedom, I think, can be really useful for us to, again, take those leaps to say, well, what if I pause for a second and I instinctively think about what would be incredibly good right now? What would be really fun or really significant? I'll stop analyzing the reams of paper that have told me what my audience want and start to try to connect with them authentically. Yeah, I can't get enough of that.
Yeah. Shame there's so much arts cuts funding happening. But anyway, we won't get political. One final question I'd like to ask you, which I think hopefully is quite a fun one, is if, you were in complete control of our industry, you were, Queen, King, Grace, what do you think we should be doing? What should we be looking out for? How do we make sure we're future fit? Go on, you've got full control. Go.
I love it. Okay, so for me, I think there's a really interesting thing happening where most products are as good as they're going to get, right? All TVs look absolutely stunning and have amazing surround sound. All dishwashers are going to give you perfect, clean dishes, and they're not going to wake the baby up late at night. Most products exist where they need to be. Noise cancelling headphones, whatever it is. And so brand becomes really important. And I'm very interested in starting to say, How do we use brands to show who we are more, how we align? And as brands start to stand for more than the products they make, who they are in the world, how they shape things in the world, they are equally trying to give off more and new signals. And this isn't just about having a logo on the chest of your t-shirt. It's about alignment and every pound being a vote. I think there's a huge opportunity, whether you're selling a fizzy drink in a plastic bottle, or whether you're selling a microchip, to start to represent more. And I'm really interested in our industry falling back in love with brands, understanding the semiotics, not just for their customers, but for all of us, thinking of brands that we may or may not have been involved in recent years, understanding what they represent, and knowing all of that is up for grabs to be changed. We're living in a world where most mornings I wake up and I say, thank God for Pfizer. I've never said that about a pharmaceutical company 2 years ago. And thank God for my bank. And it's not just, you don't have to save the world in order for your brand to be repositioned, but it definitely helps if you can. But more of that, more of recognizing the potency and the power of brands beyond what they sell on the store shelf.
Brilliant. Thank you for spending the time, taking the time today to talk to us as part of Game Changers. It's been great to see you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Lovely.